Gaslighting. Have you heard of gaslighting? It's a fascinating phenomenon that has its roots in the 1944 film Gaslight. In this classic film, the term describes a particularly devious form of manipulation. It's about making someone question their reality, perceptions, memories, or even their sanity. The goal is to gain control over them. This tactic is so effective that it erodes confidence and trust in one's thoughts. It creates confusion and dependence. And it's not just a movie. Gaslighting has been around for a while, but it really took off in the mid-2010 AS. Merriam-Webster defines it as psychological manipulation to make someone question their memory or mental stability. By 2022, it had become a buzzword used for various disagreements, which was great because it meant that more people were talking about it. However, this broader usage risks minimizing the seriousness of true gaslighting, which is a shame. Triangulation. In psychology, triangulation is a manipulative tactic where someone uses threats of exclusion or covert communication to divide and control others. This indirect form of manipulation, often conducted behind someone's back, is driven by insecurity. Those employing triangulation seek to gain an advantage or a sense of security in relationships by creating conflicts among others. It is a strategy used by selfish individuals to protect their egos, resulting in limited direct communication between the manipulated parties, who primarily interact through the manipulator. There are many ways triangulation manifests, but it always has the same aim: to divide and conquer. A parent might ignore their children's individuality and treat siblings differently, discouraging direct communication between them except through the parent. A partner or friend might involve a third person to create tension, drama, or pressure, compelling someone to act against their will. Individuals also use triangulation to avoid direct confrontation, bringing another person into a relationship conflict. People with cluster B personality disorders, such as narcissistic, antisocial, histrionic, and borderline personality disorders, engage in triangulation because they measure their self-worth through competition with others. Name calling. It is not uncommon for manipulators to use negative labels to describe the victim's personality traits or behaviors. This tactic may inadvertently make the victim feel inferior and unworthy of better treatment. Initially, the manipulator may start with mild, seemingly harmless comments. However, as the victim becomes accustomed to these negative remarks, the intensity and frequency of the name-calling may increase. This gradual escalation may inadvertently result in the victim internalizing these derogatory labels, further diminishing their self-esteem. The manipulator's strategy may involve subtly undermining the victim's confidence and sense of self-worth. By repeatedly labeling the victim with negative terms, the manipulator may create a narrative that the victim is flawed or inadequate. Over time, the victim may start to believe these false characterizations, feeling increasingly powerless and dependent on the manipulator. This psychological manipulation may trap the victim in a cycle of self-doubt and emotional subjugation. Ultimately, the manipulator's goal may be to control the victim by eroding their self-esteem and making them feel unworthy of respect or better treatment. This insidious process may go unnoticed until the victim's self-worth is significantly damaged, leaving them vulnerable to further manipulation and control. Generalizations. It is possible that generalizations occur when the traits of one individual are attributed to an entire group within the same demographic. For instance, a manipulator might assert all women are more focused on themselves than on their partners. This tactic could potentially pressure the victim to conform to behaviors or attitudes that the manipulator finds agreeable or easier to control. By making sweeping statements, manipulators could create a distorted reality that encourages the victim to distance themselves from the negative stereotype. This can sometimes lead the victim to try to prove that they are different from the generalized depiction. As a result, the victim may become more malleable and easier to manipulate, aligning their behavior with the manipulator's desires to avoid criticism or negative labeling. This form of manipulation can be insidious because it exploits the victim's desire for acceptance and validation. It may encourage them to adopt behaviors that please the manipulator, which could ultimately make them more compliant and controllable. Over time, the victim may lose their sense of individuality and autonomy, increasingly conforming to the manipulator's expectations and demands to avoid being unfairly generalized. Love bombing. Have you ever heard of love bombing? It's a great way to show someone you care. It's when someone overwhelms another person with affection, intense emotions, and lots of time and energy. This tactic often includes giving gifts, making elaborate declarations of admiration, and dedicating all their efforts to pleasing the target. Manipulators use love bombing to rapidly build intimacy and trust, creating an idealized interaction for the victim to seek. By doing so, the manipulator exploits the person's natural desire to feel wanted and appreciated, transforming it into a tool to increase the victim's devotion. This approach preys on the victim's need for validation, making them more susceptible to the manipulator's control. The constant attention and flattery make the victim feel special and deeply connected, often blinding them to the manipulator's underlying intentions. Over time, this intense affection can turn into a powerful means of control as the victim becomes increasingly dependent on the manipulator for emotional fulfillment. Thus, love bombing serves as a potent strategy for manipulators to secure and maintain dominance over their targets. Playing on insecurities. Emotional manipulators are highly skilled at identifying and intensifying a person's insecurities. They target a person's sense of shame, an internalized feeling of inadequacy. Since shame is a painful emotion that people instinctively try to avoid, triggering it encourages compliance with the manipulator to avoid future discomfort. Rickeman says, the most common tactic is for someone to learn your unique triggers or sensitivities and use those against you. Some people are naturally very good at studying you and learning exactly what buttons to press to manipulate you. For instance, if you grew up feeling unimportant due to a selfish or self-absorbed parent, a manipulator might accuse you of being selfish. This tactic presses on a deep childhood wound, causing you to question yourself and become motivated to avoid appearing selfish. Manipulators exploit these vulnerabilities to exert control and influence over their victims. They manipulate them into compliance and reinforce their sense of inadequacy. Passive-aggressiveness. Passive-aggressive communication is a fascinating phenomenon. It occurs when someone expresses themselves indirectly, avoiding straightforward statements about what they truly mean. This behavior can manifest in various forms, such as sarcasm, pouting, or backhanded compliments. Such tactics keep the victim on their toes, perpetually guessing and trying to anticipate or adjust to the manipulator's moods and reactions. This constant monitoring diverts the victim's attention from their own feelings and needs, effectively maintaining the focus and the power on the manipulator. The victim becomes preoccupied with managing the manipulator's emotional landscape, leaving little room to evaluate their own emotions or the health of the relationship. This dynamic ensures that the manipulator retains control, as the victim is too consumed with trying to please or appease them to consider their own well-being. By keeping the victim off balance and uncertain, the manipulator reinforces their dominance, making it difficult for the victim to assert themselves or address their own needs within the relationship, treating you like a child. It might be said that a manipulator infantilizes their victim by treating them as if they are younger or less capable, often treating them like a child. This specific form of gaslighting may have the effect of undermining the victim's self-trust and belief in their ability to handle responsibilities. Infantilization can manifest in various ways, such as speaking in a way that makes the victim feel less intelligent, taking over tasks that the victim is fully capable of handling independently, or treating them as if they are incapable of performing certain tasks. By constantly questioning the victim's capabilities, the manipulator creates a dynamic where the victim feels dependent and less confident in their own skills. This repeated undermining may have the effect of eroding the victim's self-esteem, making them more reliant on the manipulator for decision-making and everyday tasks. The victim may start to doubt their competence, which could reinforce the manipulator's control and dominance in the relationship. Over time, this manipulation could potentially lead to significant emotional and psychological harm, as the victim may become increasingly disempowered and disconnected from their sense of autonomy and self-worth.